indeed a very fascinating world. But at first I was like, DAOs, and I was trying to get involved, didn't have no idea how. And to be honest, it felt a bit like a cold technological nerd world where I didn't fit in at all. So it was very hard. It was not accessible, especially for women, if I have to be honest. I saw a lot of men there, young men. I was like, what am I doing here? What is this fuss about? Crypto, sure. And then I met Kris, and I had a long call with him on a Monday, a bit desperate, like, what are you doing there? You seem like such a nice person and a warm person. And you have the same background as I have. Like, I have a literature degree, right? And I'm a facilitator, so it's nothing to do with technology at all. And he had the same profile, so I thought he's going to tell me how. So I think that's why it's also very, very interesting to invite him here and to listen to his story and the human side of DAOs, not only the technical side, but what is so different in those DAOs? How do they organize? What is all the fuss about? And yeah, I think Kris is a very, very good person to share his opinions on that. For now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Kris.
Thanks for having me.
Kris, maybe you can start with sharing in which DAO you're active and what they do exactly.
Yes, I can start there. So I work for Gitcoin. Are there some people who know Gitcoin who are here? So not Bitcoin, Gitcoin with a G. Okay, yes, cool. So we have a few people. So Gitcoin is a project that stimulates and promotes actually the use of open source. They have a very cool project, a system that is called quadratic funding. So when you give to an open source project that you believe in, that is going to improve the world, that is maybe a public good, because a lot of like open source projects don't get any funding. So how it simply works is that we can go into it maybe a little bit later, but the very short explanation is if you give, for example, $1, there is a mechanism that makes it so that if a lot of people give to that project, if that project becomes popular, then it gets matched with extra funding. And so the more people who give, the more funding you get. So very often there's like projects that you just give like $1 to, and like Gitcoin matches it with its partners for about $100 for each $1. So that's like one of the core elements that Gitcoin does, but they do a whole lot of other things. And so yeah, they started as like just a software company, and now in the past, I think in August, we created a DAO, and so this is now fully in the hands of the community who decides what happens with our funding and so on. So that's where I work. So.
Who knows what a DAO is? Okay, not everybody. So, Kris, what the heck is a DAO?
Yeah, so a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, a very fancy word to just say it's a community of people coming together and trying to make decisions in a decentralized way. And very often, and most of the time, I think DAOs have a token and a governance token. So it's just a token that is used to let the community actually make decisions on how the community is governed. So that's part of the explanation, yes.
So I hear a lot of very cool values. I hear commons, I hear governing in a very democratic way, I hear earning tokens for making very democratic decisions, I hear community. How does a DAO do that?
Yeah.
What rules are in place? How do you govern this?
There are not a lot of rules in the sense that you make the rules yourself. That's actually what you do together with the community. So it really depends. How we have set it up is that we have a group of people, we call them the stewards. I'm now part of the Gitcoin DAO. I work there, but I also, before I started working there, I already became a steward. And what does that mean? So many people have the tokens, the GTC tokens, that's the tokens of the DAO, and they can delegate these tokens to some of the stewards. So the stewards are just people who are like known in the community, or who are just like who want to maybe get known and like help govern all of this. And they say like, okay, you can delegate your tokens to me. So what does that mean? Okay, you have some GTC tokens, and you can still do whatever you want with them. You can sell them, or if they were for sale, because it's a governance token. But what happens is that you can delegate your power to vote on certain decisions to people who are very much involved with the community. And so that's like a group right now of about 50 stewards who would decide on a lot of things. And so how does that work very practically? Imagine in Gitcoin we work with a number of work streams who focus on different things. Like, for example, I work in the community experience work stream, but you have a work stream on how you can avoid that people attack the system. And so they want to hire people to actually like really make the system better. They also want to continue to develop Gitcoin. And so all these work streams, they make a proposal of a budget proposal, and they say we want to do all these things, and by the end of this quarter we want to achieve this and that and that. And then the stewards vote on the proposal, and when the proposal gets passed with like a threshold that is passed, the funding just gets released, and then the people in that work stream can start using it. I hope I'm not getting too much into the weeds immediately here.
No, what's fascinating is that in a DAO we are basically recreating new societies with politicians that get elected, that are the stewards, right?
Totally.
And then vote on those decisions. You said earlier that you work at the Gitcoin DAO.
Yeah.
You work there. Where is there?
Brussels. I'm just working from home.
So can you walk us through like where do you work like physically, and how does a day look like for someone like you who works for a DAO?
Very lonely, and I should come to Citizens Corner more and just like work here because you have the space, and we've talked about it. I should really do it. But yeah, how does my day look? Very free in a way, in the sense, and very, very long also. But yeah, because we're always on, and we have people all over the world, so everyone just works from home. And so you have people who are in Asia, and you have a lot of people in the US, you have people in Australia, so like long days sometimes. But I work from home. I just decide when I want to work, and there's some things that I want to achieve in my job, and most of the time I'm just behind my desk having calls with people. Like the thing that most of the people discovered with COVID over the past 2 years working from home, like I've been doing that for like about 5 years, just being in my living room behind my computer on screens. Yeah.
Just a great plug to say that at the corner every Friday we do a crypto co-working, so that you can feel less alone.
How do you get paid?
I get paid like most people. People who are independent, in the sense that I just like send an invoice and I receive an amount, and that amount I transfer to my bank account.
Our salaries,
and I pay taxes, just to be clear, also.
Our salaries and negotiations about salaries, and because I can imagine in a DAO where the structures are more democratic and things are more chaotic, to my experience. It's more fluid also. People come, people go. How do you suddenly start deciding who is going to get paid? And is that also a democratic decision on your salary, etc.?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm actually working on. For the moment, like I mentioned, we have these work streams, and some make a proposal for the budget, and they just give some standard salaries to people. And so that's for the people who work full-time. But all the work streams do this in a very different way. And so there's a lot of transparency, so people can just see how much people are getting paid. But there's quite some differences, and then like that's not great, because people, when they start comparing and like when money is involved, tensions arise. So we're trying to like create more structure on like to define how much a certain role needs to be paid, etc. So that's like the thing that we're like standardizing a little bit. But then in general, like how do you decide when someone should be paid? I guess the DAO vibe, or like the DAO mentality in general, is very often you come in and you start working, you just start showing your worth. And I really like that approach. That's also how I got into this space. In the beginning, I think I worked for like a few months for free, because I was just like, oh, this is awesome, I want to contribute to this. And there's a whole lot of people who just come into this as like, you see a need and you start working to just like show like, oh yeah, I think maybe you need a newsletter, or you need that piece to be developed, then I can do this, or I can help, or maybe, and you just show up and you show that you want to contribute, and that's how it starts. And then another part of it that we then start doing, and that's becoming more and more common, is that we have some funds that we reserve especially for those people, and we just give like retroactive rewards. So after they've done some things, it's just like, hey, we're just going to send you some tokens, give me your address just to thank them. And that's like, it's often just like also in meetings, and that when people show up, it's just like, oh, we're just going to send you a little bit of GTC just for showing up, because things. That's where it starts.
If you compare it to a more traditional company where you have like a CEO, and then if you want to get in, you send your application letter, and then you have a jury that decides like, okay, you're hired, and then you get a fixed salary that somebody decided. This is completely different. What I hear is that if you're looking for a job, you can actually go and experience a place and a space first and see if you like it, and then start contributing. I also hear that you need another skill set. You need a lot more self-regulation, learning how to take initiative in a space. How do you do that? Because I can also, like, my experience coming into all those DAOs was like, oh my God, where do I start? How do I do this? People are a bit shy, especially when you don't recognize people that look a bit like you or have the same profile. So for a lot of people, I can imagine it's not accessible. How do they cope with that? How do they open up for people? How do they empower people to take initiative and invite them to do that?
I've noticed that for some people, it actually is way easier to start contributing in the sense that you can just like do it in the chat. So most of the DAOs are like Discord is the place where most of is the chat system where most of the DAOs are now organized. And so you're just like in these channels and you see requests for things that need to be done. And so a lot of people who actually are a bit shy can just like send a message and they're like, hey, maybe I can start doing this. So that's like one thing. Like the more introverted people often get, I feel, more chances to actually just prove themselves by doing something. And I think that's awesome. Apart from this, we of course have a process. So that's actually also one of the things I'm working on. So just to explain, like I said, like I work on community experience. That's also like literally my job. I'm community experience manager. So in a DAO that entails a lot. So it's like everything is the experience of the community, and that's a lot of work. But like one of the things there is looking into the onboarding processes. So what we're doing there is just inviting everyone to regular onboarding calls that we have. Most of the time I host these and I just give an explanation like this is how we work, these are our work streams, this is how we pay people, and we like give this explanation. And then we just ask people to introduce themselves, and there's always a lot of people who are just like not saying anything, just like waiting, and then like if it stays silent, it's like, hey, we talked last week. And you're working on this, and this is awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? And then like, yeah, you put some people on the spot because like we want to kind of hear them, and like it's very important in a DAO that you like, especially because you work from home and you're far away, and it's very easy to have like misunderstandings between people because you cannot just like quickly pass by the office. You need to really figure out and sense out if you're like aligned, if you share some of the values, if it's someone who's really like in it for the mission that we have, which is supporting public goods, and who's not just there like just to make a quick buck and disappear. So we have these processes, and we're working on it more and more to make people feel welcome, but at the same time, also make sure that they're aligned with what we do.
So after working for a DAO, would you go back to working to a regular tech startup?
Never, ever, ever again, no.
Why?
It's just the freedom. Like, that's the first thing. That is so much fun. Like, I never set an alarm. I haven't set an alarm for years. So I just wake up, and that's something...
Jeez, what time?
It depends. Like, my days have become longer, and it's dark outside. So, like, I'm going to be honest, yes. Around 10. Something, around 10 most of the time. It's like, I find that the most horrible. Just like, this is like still school trauma. I've like having to get up so early, and then like working in Brussels before I lived in Ghent. It's like, no way. I just want to like not wake up early. So that's one thing.
But besides being able to wake up at 10, what are the other benefits of working for DAO compared to a regular company?
Yeah, well, the big one for sure is that legitimacy, like, and first principles. So the concept of first principles is that you like really try to simplify and then like go to the essence of why something has been decided, and like it's not just somewhat, there is officially no hierarchy, and so you just have people who come with a proposal, and the proposal needs to make sense, and if the proposal doesn't make sense, you can just say no, and you can have counter arguments, and there's like a rational discussion. And I really love this rational approach, and not just like people saying like, I have power over you and I'm just going to tell you what to do just because I say so. no, Dad, I'm not listening anymore. It's like, no, yeah, so like that's that thing. It just, I really believe that by empowering people, you can achieve so much more rather than like saying top down, you have to do this.
How many people work for DAO here? It would be super interesting to ask the same question every year for the next 3 years, and I'm pretty damn sure we're going to have a different show of hands. So the question becomes, what can we do, to basically get more people to join DAOs? What are the skill sets right now? Are you hiring?
Yes, we are hiring big time. We're hiring so many people. Yes, just go to Gitcoin DAO.com and you can apply. Developers are the most sought after. There's no developer in Ethereum who doesn't have 7 jobs every day that are offered to them. So if you have some developing skills, please just there's more than enough work. They are the half gods in this world. It's everyone wants them. But apart from this, we need all the skills. For me, as Leen said, I have a communication background. I've always done communication. We need so many people who are able to write, who are able to communicate, who are able to coordinate, because we are working in decentralized organizations, so we need people who are good, who have people skills. We need so many of those people. And we need people who can communicate and who can translate things, because that helps to bring in more people. If you explain hey, it's actually not that complicated, there's just a lot of geeky people using complicated words, and you translate it to simpler ways to just this is what the essence is. We need so many people for that, yes. So yeah, all sorts of profiles. There's really not a limit. For example, in our DAO, we need people who just answer questions, who do support tasks. We need people who look at databases, communication, whatever, all the things.
Yeah, I had the privilege to have this experience in one DAO to take a training for 10 weeks on non-violent communication. And although I knew the subject, I wanted to take the classes in this DAO environment, and I was very, very surprised, very positively surprised, that they take so much care of each other. And I wonder if it's because of the absence of a hierarchy and a structure where you go, if you have a problem with your colleague, you go to the HR. And here, the responsibility for building good connections is on everybody. How does that work in Gitcoin? Do you have certain structures or, I don't know, ways of coping with that?
Yeah, we do, and well, it's also one of the things that we're building out more, because in the beginning it was just okay, we need to set up the basics, having stewards, having some people developing, etc. But we are also hiring a lot of people, as I always like to call them, people who work with people. And one of the skill sets and one of the persons that we already have hired is, her job is conflict resolution. That's basically what she does. So whenever there's an issue, you can just go to her and say yeah, I have that conflict with that person. She has an entire process. She has studied this. And she's building this entire network of conflict resolvers, and yeah, so that's one of the things. But in general, I agree. It's something that if there's tensions, it gets escalated pretty quickly. Also because we have very much a culture of sharing in public, so conversations happen, to my feeling, sometimes a little bit too much in our public chats. Okay, would be more efficient if you could just send me a direct message, but and then sometimes you have people getting a little bit more emotional, and then that's good because there are no secrets. There's I even had before yesterday there was oh, there's something happening there, and I was immediately okay, we have our meeting with all the work streams. I hear things through the grapevine. Can we discuss this? What's going on? I would like to know. And then people answer you, and I love it.
Is it more open or safer maybe because it's online, or?
I don't know. I think because people are further away from each other, they care a lot about keeping the connections good, and they see that it is a little bit fragile because tensions build up. So that's an extra reason to pay extra attention to it. But I wouldn't say that it's it's easier. I guess that not having a hierarchy makes it easier, but not being away from each other, that makes it tougher. I'm not gonna lie about that. It's sometimes really tough to just get through difficult conflicts. Yeah.
I can imagine, because if you work in a real life environment and you have some tensions with a colleague, I mean, you have to see him every day. It's different. If you are online, it feels easier to hide and not meet that person and walk away.
Yeah, and it's like, I've had it. That's why often we get together, which is not always like, it's not great. Like over the past few years, I've been in place way more than I actually wanted to, but it's still, in a way, it is kind of efficient in the sense that the Ethereum community gets together very often, in like a few times a year for conferences, and those are also the moments that everyone organizes their team meetings, and then we spend like a lot of time together. So before I worked for Giveth, which is like a donation platform, and like what we did was spend at least a full month, a year together, that we were just like working together in a house, and that's
in real life.
Yes, and then you talk through things, and then you can like have these really good fights. But then like most of those people, like I consider them all my friends, and that's so crazy. Like I've never had such deep connections with people, because it's also that's the funny thing, like when you're apart all the time and then when you meet, it's just like such an explosion of like, wow, we've been working together for like more than a year and finally meeting you, and then it's like this beautiful connections that form, and then that's a lot of fun. Deep connections.
Thank you. I want to open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here. I'm pretty new to the whole concept of DAOs, but I've been in crypto since 2017. This actual new concept makes me ask one question, and that's related to power and voting. So, for example, you are voting on a very, very important motion in your organization. Like there is a very big decision to be made, and the options are A and B, whatever those are. And you get a vote that's 52 A and 48 B. Well, I guess that A passes, but what happens with the people who are now so basically lost? So it's a kind of a big amount of people in an organization that could be that are not maybe happy, or it actually depends a lot on them, that they actually sort of lost the vote. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, actually. Well, first of all, yeah, that's indeed how it happens. Sometimes you have that, it's just like with a slight majority that something gets passed, and people can then be unhappy, and what happens very often, well, what has happened in the past, and it will happen again in the future, and that's, to me, a beautiful thing, they fork the DAO. So what they do is just like they split up the DAO, they split it off. They're just like, we're really unhappy, and we're gonna just start our own project, we're gonna create our own token, and we're gonna like, because virtually everything that is created in the blockchain world is open source. So if it's like a product-based project, and most of them are, they just like take the code, they copy it, they do a rebrand, and they're like, we're gonna do it our way. Who's following us? Hey, 48% follow us, and they do. And the advantages of this is that you get a lot of like natural competition, and you don't get like these huge power groups. Like it's definitely also in the future at some point it is going to happen with Gitcoin as well, and like everyone is enthusiastic about this. We don't see like, oh, that's a threat. No, it's like, it's awesome. There's going to be more projects supporting open source in the future. Fantastic. Let them do it. Yeah.
Yes, questions, and again, it's very, very interesting presentations. Could you be more specifics on the genesis events when you move from being just a software company to a DAO? How does the initial coins be distributed? Who got the initial distribution, things like that, and how much of this initial distribution is still in the current amount of coins and circulations? And also, what's the relation between I guess the software company still exists. You said you invoice and you get money, I guess that's from the software company, you don't invoice the blockchain, not yet. So how does the relationship works between the legal entity, which is somewhere, and the DAO? And is there some kind of, how does the coordination between that works? Thank you.
Okay, that's a few questions in one. I'll try to answer concisely on some of those, but they're good questions. I'll start maybe with the end, with when it comes to invoicing and the company behind it. The company is slowly dissolving. So right now I am indeed like invoicing to the company, but there's a lot of people in the DAO who are just like directly, invoicing to the DAO. And how that happens is that there's more and more legal structures being set up that they are like payment processors. So they're just like, there's a whole lot of people working in the US, and so they just invoice through like an entity that's somewhere in between in the US, and that just like takes care of transferring the tokens into dollars and takes care of like other legal protection and things that they need. So there's a lot of companies spinning up who are doing this. The goal is that in a year or so the company will just not exist anymore, and then I will also have to invoice in that way. So that's one thing. Then on the question like how do you transform yourself from being a company into a DAO and this token distribution, how that most of the time happens is just like you create a token which you put on the market, like so GTC, which is our token, officially that's also like how we communicate it always. I'm saying it again, like it has no economic value. That's like how we say this for many legal reasons. But people do with this token what they want. And so it is being exchanged on exchanges, and so it does actually have value now. Is this being recorded? So it's just a factual fact. People think it has value. So that's how it just is. How is this distribution handled? Like with Gitcoin, it's actually a beautiful story because Gitcoin works with people donating for good causes, for supporting public goods. And so what they did is just everyone who has in the past given to one of these causes received an airdrop. So an airdrop, who knows what an airdrop is? Quite some people. Okay, so what happens is actually when you do a donation on Gitcoin, it's just you with MetaMask, you connect to Gitcoin, to our platform, and there you make a transfer of that $1 or whatever amount you want to give. And then there is a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain proving that you have donated once in the past or multiple times. And so based on how many times you gave in the past, the amount didn't really matter, but just the fact that you gave something entitled you to receive some Gitcoin tokens, some GTC. And so everyone who did this received GTC. And so it was a very large airdrop for a whole lot of people, in the sense that Gitcoin is, it's one of the biggest brands in the Ethereum ecospace. So what happens then is how, just also maybe very briefly to explain, because it took me a while to actually get this myself, honestly, and I've been in this space for a while, and I'm just not good with economics. I was like, how do these tokens actually suddenly have value? And the simple reason is like it is like all these exchanges, a lot of them are decentralized, so people just put the tokens there. And so as soon as other people start just making the decision, I want this token, and they see that the token is available, they start giving USDC or DAI or anything for these tokens. And so because there's just a number of tokens, the value just goes up. Simple explanation, but whatever. But so because of that, from the launch, immediately of that token had quite a big value, and so all those people suddenly had quite some tokens which had some value, and actually the value does matter in the sense that there was just decided the moment, and that's something the DAO decides, like who receives how much. So with us, like most just went to the community, and a little part just stayed in the treasury of Gitcoin. So that treasury, because the token value went up so much, is quite big, and with that we can just pay our contributors in the coming years for quite a while. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
So the company doesn't own anything anymore?
No, the company just has like its own like budget, but that's like just like minimum. It's just like, the DAO has a treasury. Yeah.
And so we're actually trying to start like a DAO for this space, managing the citizen corner, and also as a community, of the crypto community, the crypto citizens of Brussels. And so all of that is super interesting to learn. Also, I take the opportunity to say that actually there is a new Gitcoin grant round of funding started today.
Yes, there was a big presentation, and this gentleman was in the presentation presenting because he's...
This gentleman too.
Yes. So that's like how Gitcoin works, like the thing that I said with like the matching funding. that happens like every 2 months or so, and these are like Gitcoin grants rounds. And yeah, so that started today. We had our launch moment, and the fun thing is that for the first time we also have thematic rounds that focus, like normally it's that like we focus on open source digital projects, and for the first time we have a number of wider themes that go beyond it, and one of them is everything that has to do with climate, and that's why Xavier was there. So maybe you can tell us something about this, Xavier.
Yeah, so actually there is a Gitcoin grant that just started for Imagine Brussels, right? So you can go donate, we invite you to do that, and what matters, because of this quadratic funding scheme, the amount of money you donate doesn't matter as much as the fact that you donate, right? In a classic matching fund, if you give €1, they match €1. But the problem with that is that it's not fair for a project, for example, in Africa, that may have a harder time to raise as much money, that may have 100 people giving €1 versus a project in Europe that may have 10 people giving €1,000, right? In that case, if you have a big DAO foundation or whoever wants to donate, they will basically match much more and give much more money proportionally to the project in Europe than the project in Africa.
Yes, and yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And the beauty of quadratic funding is actually it solves that problem, because it looks much more at how wide the support is from the community. If there's many more donors for the project A than the project B, they're gonna reward that way much more. So at the end, if you give €10 to a project, it might be matched 10x.
Yeah, 10x, 100x even. It's been crazy. Like we stop projects get, like I've had it often that I just gave $1 and then said matching amount like 150 or something. I'm like wow. So it's sometimes really impressive. And so we've given. I'm really bad at numbers. I was like I'm gonna remember these numbers. We've given out about $40 million already over these past 12 rounds to people like as extra funding. And now, so for this round, we have the highest matching funds ever that we've done, and something doesn't make sense, because this is $2 million. I think it's because there's these side rounds and stuff on top of it. But like this, we have $2 million that we're giving out, yeah, in extra funding, yeah.
So yeah, so as part of this, with All for Climate, actually, which is the non-profit that we had started, we actually been helping Gitcoin to source various different dozens of projects related to the climate. There is a project for planting trees in Uganda. There is a project in Berlin to create a transformation center for a regenerative culture. There is, of course, Imagine Brussels, other project as well. So go check it out on Gitcoin. And I saw there was a question over there.
Thank you, Kris, for the presentation. My question was around tooling. So if here you want to start a new DAO, or anyone wants to start a new DAO, what kind of tools do you suggest people use? Or like social media or anything else? I think it has been like an increased development in the last years, and now we have some tools to choose from.
Yeah, there's so many. There's a lot of tools. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to like name them all. So they're like one of the famous one that I used to use myself was Aragon. So that's a one that has existed for a few years. There's a whole lot of different elements in the toolkit that you can use. Like for example, another one is most of the projects just have their treasury held in one of these platforms. So Aragon provided all of that. We have, for example, Gnosis is one that is a multi-sig. And what is a multi-sig? It is just actually a wallet that when you want to have a transaction, multiple people have to sign to say like, okay, this transaction can go through, so that like not just one person can just have all the power. Like, and I think one I mentioned before, but like many people make this joke about like, yeah, DAO is just like it's just people in a Discord with some money. But like it is true that like Discord is like I must say, like, I hate Discord because it's just so much like notifications on all the sides, and I think I'm like in 25 of them. But it's like it is an important tool. It's like where you get together is just in a chat. It's as simple as that. But that's where you start. But yeah, you have a whole lot of tools, and like I can definitely share some links, but I don't know them by heart. But we use a lot of different tools. We use Snapshot for voting. We use Tally, which is another one for transferring funds. We use multi-sig, Gnosis. There's a whole lot of different things, and it depends on which projects. But it's a treasure trove. There's lots of initiatives that help with creating DAO. Yeah.
All right, and last question, maybe?
If I want to donate €1, what's the gas cost?
Oh no, I knew this question.
It's just a field.
Yeah, so it depends. It really depends on the gas price, first of all. But no, apart from that, if you're just gonna donate €1 or $1, it's gonna cost you more than $1, unfortunately, right now. But so it was mentioned a little bit before, but I don't want to go into everything that's like Ethereum side chains and all the things. But like with Gitcoin, we do have 2 solutions there to make it cheaper, and that is DK Sync. So that's one that you go actually off the main chain, and then you actually make cheaper transfers to donate to all the projects that you want to donate something to, and then it comes back and it confirms the transaction on Ethereum. And another one that has been mentioned before is Polygon Matic, and so that's another way that if you already have funds to buy some nice NFTs on Polygon, you can just use Gitcoin there. And in that sense, if you just want to donate $1 on Polygon, then it's gonna just cost you a few cents. So actually, it is possible. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I must say it's been wonderful watching you and seeing how somebody can join a company or a DAO completely out of own initiative and motivation and wow, I'm gonna join this, and you have this sort of stress-free atmosphere around you, except for the millions of notifications over Discord. And then I don't think we can solve that in a work environment. But on the other hand, it's very, very inspiring to see how you can, from your own motivation, a willingness to learn, taking the challenge to enter this new environment, a non-hierarchical environment, and just discover and feeling ownership over building it. Hey, I'm part of this, and actually, because I'm part of it, I can shape it. It becomes a little bit a part of me, and that is extremely inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and I hope you inspired the crowd here as well to join the DAO.brussels or anything else.
All right, so we still have half an hour. We went a bit over time, but it's fine. I hope you don't mind. So you're free to stay for another 30 minutes. So the idea now is to do more unconfirmed style tables. So if you want to continue digging into that topic of DAOs, you can do a table with Kris. But there are also other topics, so you can flip the sheet of paper on the table and write another topic or pick the one that you want. Or you can also just hang around and have some beers or juices, or maybe there's still some tea. And otherwise, don't forget, talking of Discord, there is DAO.brussels, and there is a Discord. And just in case you don't have already enough Discord to follow, there is one more that you can join. Thank you, everyone.